Creative Club, and welcome to this video where we're going to be looking at different types of watercolour resist painting inspired by Easter. So we should be creating something like this. You're going to need a piece of thick paper or thin card. That can be any colour, but a paler colour is best. You're also going to need some glue, some paints. I've got here some watercolour paints in a palette like this. You might have something similar. If you don't have something like this, then poster paints mixed with a little bit of water, or acrylic paints mixed with a little bit of water should also work for this activity. You're also going to need a white crayon or oil pastel. You're going to need a small piece of card to draw your egg template on, and then you're going to need to cut that out ready so that it looks like this. And then finally you'll need some scissors. You'll need some nice coloured background paper for your final artwork as well. This can be any colour, and you can decide at the end which colour will match your artwork. So let's get started. The first thing you're going to do is divide your piece of paper up into 8 different sections. So you do that by folding it in half this way, and then folding it in half this way. And then we're going to fold these ends in on each other as well. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we need another 2 folds to make 8 sections altogether. And we're going to use these sections to try out some different patterns for our eggs. And as you can see, our egg template fits perfectly into each of these sections, so that by the end we have 8 different patterned eggs, which we can cut out. But before we get to that stage, we're going to experiment a bit with what happens when you mix oil pastels and watercolour paint. Now, oil pastels have a kind of oily texture, or wax also is kind of like an oily texture, and that doesn't mix with water in the watercolour paint. So that's why the two things create these really interesting effects, like these zigzags here are where I have used the oil pastel to create a pattern. So each of these sections you can do a completely different pattern, and you can decide a variety of colours. But first of all, I'm going to do some dots in this corner, I think. So I've got 7 patterns here. Now for my last pattern, I'm going to do something slightly different. I'm going to leave it plain for now, and then I'll show you something special that we're going to do in that square at the end. Now we're ready for our watercolour paints. So I am going to start off, bring my watercolour paints out here so that you can see them. I've got this little tray for mixing my watercolours in, and I've got a pot of water so that I can keep my brush nice and clean. So I'm going to start with some blue, I think. Nice blue colour. And I'm going to brush it this way. You see how where the oil pastels are, my paint can't go there. Show you something interesting that you can do on this square. So an additional material you can use if you have it in your cupboard is some standard table salt, so this kind of thing. And salt reacts really interestingly to paint. So what the first thing I'm going to do is create a wash on the background. So that's a blank one colour all over the back. I'm going to use green. I'm going to go all over the back like this, covering it. Some of the colours from the other square are bleeding in, and that's absolutely fine. Then I'm going to take some salt, tip just a tiny bit into my hand, like that, and then sprinkle it all over the top. You can see it's starting to react with the paint already, absorbing it towards itself so that it creates this interesting pattern. I'm going to do a little bit more in the middle because I know that's where my egg is going to be. And then I'm going to take my brush again and take a different colour, a darker colour, and just dip the tip of my brush in slightly there and go in where there's some salt and just dab it in slightly, just to show where the salt is even more and create a really interesting effect. Okay, our painting is done. So what we need to do now is leave this to dry, and we want it to be completely dry before we move on to the next step. So now that the painting is completely dry, I'm just going to dust off the salt on this section here and see what's happened. You can see it's left a kind of speckled effect. Where the salt has been, it absorbs it and then creates a kind of speckled effect, which is really interesting. So the next thing to do is to start to transform these into our egg shapes. So very simply, we are going to draw around our template that we did earlier. And of course, now we cut these out. So now that we've cut all of our eggs out, we're going to transform these into a lovely piece of artwork to celebrate Easter. So you should have a colourful piece of card or paper. It's going to be your background now for this final part of the activity. You can have a little bit of a play with thinking about how you'd like to arrange your egg shapes onto your background. What I think works really well is arranging them in a sort of flower shape. So to do that, you select the 4 best ones. So I think my rainbow zigzag one works really well. I like this bold stripy one. I like this swirly one best, and probably this one. And then these 4, although they're lovely, aren't as strong. So that's a decision I've made. These less strong ones are going to be the background of my flower shape. So we will stick them in a 4 pattern like this. So I'm happy with how those are arranged. Then I'm going to take the really colourful ones and do the same again, but filling in the space in between the eggs that I've already laid down. So this one's going to go here. That's a really lovely pattern, and you could leave your design just like this. However, if you still have your paints and pastel handy, you can add a final finishing touch to your work. So at the bottom here, where I've left a little bit of space, I'm going to write a message using my white pastel. I'm going to write Happy Easter, but you could write whatever you like. And then I'm going to use my paintbrush and a dark shade of paint, so I'm going with blue, and I'm just going to put my paint over the top, just brushing it where the pastel is so that people can read my message. Happy Easter. And there we go. Finished artwork. Perfect for Easter. If you want, you could put it in your window so that other people can see it too. Well done, Creative Club.